Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA president constantly patrols my lake property and then calls the cops on me for supposedly illegal hunting. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one starts like this. So I own a lakefront property and enjoy every aspect that having a large chunk of land and being on the water has to offer me. This place could be considered almost a mini paradise to some people, including myself, if it was not for one small problem. And by small, I mean about 5'10" and 230 pounds. His name is Barry and he's the most unlikable person I've ever met in my life. And I spent years working different jobs in both retail and phone marketing, so I've heard some horrible things from people and seen the worst side that a person can be. Even then, Barry seemed to top them all. Now, Barry was the president of the HOA and took that title very seriously. Not in the way that made him want to do the job right or make things good for people though, it's just in the way that he felt important from it and loved the power that it gave him. So he would regularly go on power trips and start harassing people for the slightest infringements against HOA policies. It did not help that in addition to having that power, he also was a bit of a busybody and in everybody's business. Again, not in the caring way, but he felt totally entitled to know what was going on in everyone's private lives just because he was the HOA president. One example of this that I think was the worst was somebody was clearly hosting people over after somebody died. I don't know if it was after a wake or something else, but it was clearly a somber time, but Barry did not make the normal choices of either leaving the family alone or giving his condolences. Instead, he chose the crazy Barry option, which was to overstep his way and start asking a ton of personal questions about the situation that would make anybody uncomfortable. He claimed he had to know everything that was going on in order to run the neighborhood right. Everyone knew the truth was that he could not mind his own business, but I could give more examples of how Barry was crazy, but I think you get the idea. And I should move on to how Barry has anything to do with my story. Now, Barry and I have had problems for a while that had just been simmering. I want to make this perfectly clear that my property does not lie within the boundaries of the HOA. That means that Barry has no control over my property and I don't have to follow a single HOA rule of him because of that. Barry of course hates this fact and has tried numerous times to convince me that he should be able to tell me what to do. He claims that the entire lake falls under HOA jurisdiction, and that means his rules apply to the lake and all the homes that are living on it. Well, first of all, I think it's a little weird he keeps saying that the lake is under his jurisdiction, as if the lake can break rules or pay fines. I'd understand if he was trying to say he had the right to protect the lake and just did not want people throwing trash or things in the water, but no, he just wanted to be able to tell the people who lived on the lake what they could and could not do. This has caused many small issues between the two of us because I refuse to follow the HOA rules and he cannot do much about it since he knows deep down that he is not in the right. He thinks that I should not be able to go on the lake between certain hours and cannot do certain activities like fishing, which is totally legal here by the way for me to fish on the lake. It is just that Barry does not want me to do it, claiming it can be dangerous for people when I cast my line. And yes, that was his real excuse against me wanting to fish. I know that what my rights are and the fact that my property line extends slightly into the lake. Meaning that as long as I am in that area, I can do what I please because it is my own property. Due to me reading far too many stories online, I've been keeping notes on all the interactions I have with Barry just in case something over the line happens. Which, spoiler alert, it did. One of the things I enjoy doing on my property is archery. I have enough land set up so that I can do it while being totally safe. I never aim at or into the water and only at my targets. And hell, I even have my targets set up in a way that if I was to somehow go so far off the target, the only thing the arrow would be aimed at would be my own house. I take safety very importantly, and again within state law I'm totally in the clear to be doing this. One day I was setting up my targets and just doing my thing when Barry comes in on his little motorboat right up to my shoreline. Barry looks angrier than I've ever seen him in the past. His face was so red it looked like tomato, and instead of just speaking to me like a normal human being, he went totally off the rails and just started to scream at me. Every other word had spit flying out of his mouth. I don't think he ever saw me doing archery before this, by the way. Me, what's the problem? Slow down and just talk to me. Barry, I got complaints about you. I've seen you with a dangerous weapon and I didn't want to believe it. But now I come down here and I see you holding that very same weapon. Me, it's just a bow and arrow for some archery practice. Barry, Don't give me your little cover-up story. We both know exactly what's going on here. You are illegally hunting. Me, I'm not hunting anything. This is not even a hunting bow. Barry, you think you can do anything you want because some of the lake is on your property. Well, you're in for a big wake-up call because I'm putting my foot down. If it was not for a concerned HOA member, I would have never known what you were doing here. Me, again, I have not done anything illegal. You can check the state laws yourself if you don't believe me. Barry, first you go after the fish and now the wildlife. How long before you end up hurting a person? It doesn't matter what the state law says. Murder is still illegal. Me, oh, I have killed somebody now? Barry, don't get smart with me. You're disturbing the peace along with being a danger to wildlife and other residents. The HOA does not stand for this kind of behavior. What followed this was about half an hour of the two of us going back and forth with our more usual type of fight. He was insisting, no, demanding that I stop fishing and doing archery at once. That as the head of the HOA, he was putting me on official notice and the fines would be coming for me soon. In the end, I was telling him that I was not part of the HOA, which he knew, and that his stupid lake jurisdiction did not mean anything. During this entire time, Barry did not calm down and actually got even angrier the longer the two of us were speaking. I knew that he was never going to get it through his head that he did not control the entire lake and my property, including the part of the lake that was on it, which was my business. I told him exactly where he could shove those fines that he wanted to give me, and he went on another rant about how I needed to give him respect. Like, dude, I give respect to people that earn it, and you have not earned even a single shred of it during the entire time I've known you. Me, okay, look clearly, we're not going to get anywhere trying to convince each other. Let me just state a fact now. This is my private property, and I've not violated any laws. You need to leave my property now as you're not welcome here. Barry, I'm not going anywhere. My boat is on the water and that's HOA property as I said before. You are the one that does not want to listen and follow the rules. I know you're breaking the law doing this, so as HOA president I have the right to be here. Me, unless you're invited onto my property or I have a warrant signed by a judge to be here, I get the final say, and I'm saying that you need to leave my property right now. You might think being the president of an HOA that I'm not even in makes you all big and powerful, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It doesn't. And now leave my property or we are going to have a problem here. He again chose the worst option, which was to not leave and instead make things even worse and more insane. He was now going from saying I could hurt animals and people to saying that I was clearly trying to and he had to confiscate my weapons, aka my bow and fishing rod. Then he told me that he was going to call the cops on me, so yeah, I let him call the cops while he was doing that. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I wanted all the lies he was telling over the phone to be actually recorded along with anything else he did or said to me. So I just watched calmly as he told the police over the phone that he was the HOA president and one of his residents was using weapons to attack animals and people. Once he was off the phone with them, he continued going back and forth with me. I was just gaining more evidence against him by the second from my recording. Now the police got there within like 5 minutes and I feel like it had something to do with him claiming that I had a weapon. I would like to note that when he came up to me, I was setting up targets and had not even taken my bow or arrows out of their case, but the police showed up with their guns drawn, thinking the weapon mentioned was a gun. They were asking who was holding a weapon here, and Barry told them that I was the one with the weapons. I told them I had no gun on me when they told me to drop it, and they still had to approach me and check to see if I had anything on me because of what Barry had said on the phone. I was still able to record for the most part everything that was going on, but I knew the police body cams would be in my favor. They started questioning Barry first of all and asking him where I had a weapon. This was when he finally told them that the weapons in question were a fishing rod and a bow. They were not happy about this, but still had to settle the issues and claims going on in the phone call, so one of the officers was taking a statement from me and I tried my best to condense everything going on. Me, he runs the HOA, but it's over on the other side of the lake. He just came onto my property to tell me what I can and cannot do based on the HOA rules. He thinks that he owns the lake or something and can stop me from fishing and stuff on the part of the lake that belongs to me. I asked him to leave and he refused, and that was when he called the cops and told all of those lies. Police, do you have any paperwork or property records just so we can confirm? I was happy to give them the paperwork I had showing that I owned the land and how far into the lake my part of the land extended to. They were talking to each other and I did not know what was gonna happen for a while. I think they were trying to confirm everything before they decided to take any action. Finally, they asked me if I wanted Barry to leave my property and I told them I did. They tried to tell him that this was my private property and were just requesting him to leave, so he had to. Barry once again refused, claiming he was the HOA president and had the right to be on the lake since it was HOA property. The cops shut him down though and told him flat out that what he was doing was trespassing and he could actually get arrested if he was refusing to leave. Still though, Barry decided to hold his ground like an absolute moron. He was arrested for trespassing and forcibly taken off of my property and right into a police cruiser. That was not the only actual crime he was being charged with from the district attorney's office. I learned that day that the police and court don't like it when people call 911 pretending that somebody is holding a weapon only to find out that it was a lie. I feel like he could have gotten away with it as a warning if he knew how to keep his mouth shut, but this was Barry, so of course he couldn't. He just insulted the cops taking him away for not doing their job and apparently infringing on his rights as an HOA president. Him getting taken away from police would be a good place for this story to end, but there's actually a little bit more because I kind of got revenge on Barry on total accident after this whole ordeal. So I kind of wanted to just put up a couple signs near my shoreline about how it was private property and that I did not want anybody trespassing. Well, a couple of other homeowners on the lake saw my signs and were curious about it. It turns out that they had no idea that the shoreline or even the lake was possible to be on their property. So I started urging them to check where their property lines were, and well, a few found out that their property was on the shoreline or the lake too. They were now starting to wonder if Barry and the HOA actually had any rights to the lake at all. A couple of the homeowners were part of the HOA, but at the end of the day it was still their property. The HOA couldn't just take it from them. They could impose rules sadly, but they couldn't totally control everything. Barry of course was released pending a trial for what he did fairly quickly and started to get even more crazy about the lake. He was trying to tell people that nobody was allowed on the lake unless they got a form signed by the HOA. A form saying when they wanted to be on the lake for how long and what they were gonna do. And yes, he was trying to impose this only everybody, not just HOA members, because he was still convinced that the lake was HOA property. I went to the rest of the HOA board and filed a formal complaint against Barry. I even showed them that Barry had police involved when he trespassed on my land and I had no issues calling them again. I explained that the HOA did not own the lake and if they went through with what Barry was trying to do, I would file a lawsuit. Not against him, but against the entire HOA. They told me not to worry and to please not file a lawsuit because they promised to sort things out. I did not believe them, but only a day later I found out that Barry had chosen to step down from the HOA. The weird laws regarding the lake had also never had a chance to take effect. As for the trespassing and lying to the police, he got off with a slap on the wrist due to it being his first issue. And I guess his last because of him not being part of the HOA anymore. My signs are still up, but nobody has tried coming onto my land or telling me what to do again. And the next one is titled, I Ruined My Boss's Day. And by the way, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Because actually there's a good chance that YouTube won't show you my new videos. Anyway, for context, I'm currently a head cashier at Home Depot. I work in a higher volume store that remodeled the front end, where our registers are, a couple months ago, where our central checkout is now entirely self-checkout registers referred to as SCO. While it is SEO, it is known as assisted SEO, and they want us to be assisting as much as possible. 6 items or more, high price items and anything that could hide anything inside of it are a must, as well as pushing credit card applications. Now here is where there's been a huge issue though. Starting with the cashiers not pushing credit enough, we fell behind on our goal. So then last week, to make up for it, around halfway through the week, my supervisor told us that she wanted everyone physically on a register, head cashiers included. They don't even want us checking the schedule to send breaks or the cashiers home, even though no one is allowed to get overtime. Unless there's money to handle, we are not allowed off of a register. I bet some of you can understand how frustrating that is. It's literally an SCO. I'm having more people starting to get upset that we are constantly helping them than when we changed it to an SEO and had a ton of people angry that there are not any formal registers in the main area of the store, 2 to 3 normal registers open total on the opposite end of the store, and that's it. Also, me and the other head cashiers were not complying the entire time about staying on the register 100% of the time because we were gonna prioritize at least knowing when to send breaks and our cashier home, even if it meant us getting into trouble. Well, today was Black Friday and my supervisor, along with the store manager and a few other managers, were lurking around almost constant. A couple actually helped, which was appreciated, but I digress. The other day, I mentioned to my supervisor, when she insisted head cashiers had to stay on the register, how we were supposed to send breaks or how we would direct the line because most people won't walk to an open register even when SEO is empty. She told me to figure it out, and if I have to keep my head on a swivel so I can check customers out and get the line down, then so be it. Well, so I let them run the show and they put me on a register and I complied. I only left when I was told to cover for someone going home or to use the bathroom. My lunch was 2 hours late. I did not say anything until an hour and a half after the fact because I rarely get my breaks on time anyways, but my lunch is mandatory because no overtime. My lunch was not the only break late though. When I finally got to go on my lunch, one of my cashiers came back from the bathroom and we both saw his 15-minute break was nearly an hour late. I apologized and let him know that I had not been allowed to check the schedule or I would have sent him already. I told him to go but let him know that he should double check with our supervisor just in case, since that would mean 2 people would be leaving at once. Then I come back from my lunch and find out one of our full-time cashiers was forgotten on one of the few normal registers and was actively building over time. Something, if I was physically there for, would have never happened as she leaves at the same time every day. Except I was on my lunch 2 hours late and then later I'm sent to the garden to cover a lunch over half an hour late. When I got back inside, another cashier called because his 15 is over half an hour late. Almost 45 minutes. That's just some of what happened. I was not allowed to do my job and therefore my cashiers were actively being forgotten about because it wasn't important enough. Oh, and we got just as much credit card applications as we did earlier last week because we were forced to constantly be on registers. It is not about being on a register, it's about asking in general, something I may not like, but I do because it's my job. Or at least it was. After seeing how me not doing my job to comply with dumb rules that make no sense affected my cashiers today, and the fact that I got a call back from another job, I just put my 2 weeks in. Just to seal the deal after a crappy day, but I'm happy I'm leaving Hell Depot and could not be happier. I just worry for my cashiers who are probably gonna continue to suffer with these new rules and regulations, and especially if anyone above them actually complies to them 100%. And yeah, Ripe Stars, honestly, that sounds like the worst workplace of all time. Have any of you ever worked for Home Depot? Let me know in the comments, I would love to hear your story. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I wanted to post this story on Reddit because I really wanted to rant about this crazy neighbor drama I became a part of. You see, I own a semi-truck which I park on my farm property because I use it for my business. The emphasis on business because why else would I even own a semi-truck? Well, anyway, my dear neighbor does not seem to understand this. He is a 30-something-year-old man living alone on his property that is right next to mine, and he has been a pain in my butt ever since he moved here some 3 years back. During the difficult times of COVID, when we were all confined to our homes, my neighbor decided that he was gonna be a special snowflake. While the rest of us were following the rules and staying indoors, he would wander around shouting about how we shouldn't be afraid of the government and should instead cherish the blessing that God had bestowed upon us, the said blessing being the virus. Yep, you heard that right, he believed that the virus was a test of our faith. Separating the truth believers from the rest, as he would say, or rather shout on the top of his lungs. It was pretty clear from these bizarre rants that he was not quite right in the head. At that point though, I was bedridden due to post-virus syndrome, so I didn't pay much attention to his strange behavior. I was more focused on recovering my own health. But once I regained my strength and could finally get back to work, it was then that my neighbor decided that I would be his next target. About a week after I had resumed my work, I stepped outside one morning to find my neighbor going absolutely crazy. He was yelling something about my semi-truck being a symbol of corporate greed, and how my diesel engine was polluting the world. It was like my semi-truck had personally gone to his house and tried to strangle him in his sleep. Still, I approached him calmly, trying to reason with him because I didn't want to go all aggressive when I barely knew him. I explained that my semi-truck was essential for my livelihood and I followed all environmental regulations to minimize its impact. But it seemed like he was possessed or something. He started yelling absurd things like, "Your truck is the devil's chariot, spreading darkness and chaos," and "You're a pawn in the corporate conspiracy to destroy the planet." I was and still am sure that he had some kind of mental issues, and that was when things started escalating. My neighbor started talking to my other neighbors about my evil vehicle and how he was afraid that I would contaminate the air so much that the nature in our neighborhood would die. And while most of them ignored his words, there were some who agreed and visited my house to ask me to remove my semi-truck. I had to waste an hour arguing with them that no, I cannot just give it up, and no, my single vehicle was not gonna eradicate the nature. Things took an especially bizarre turn when, one night, my neighbor trespassed onto my property. I woke up to the sound of commotion and rushed outside only to discover him spray painting graffiti all over my beloved semi-truck. He had somehow managed to break into my property, and there he was, defacing my truck with phrases like "demon spawn" and "bringer of death." I had to involve the police, and after a thorough investigation, they arrested and jailed him for destruction of property and trespassing, but more importantly, all of this finally stopped him from shouting about my semi-truck even after he was released. However, my peace was short-lived. Approximately a month later, I opened my front door to find a pamphlet on my doorstep. This pamphlet labeled my semi-truck as a monstrosity responsible for the destruction of God's beautiful environment, and it threatened me with dire consequences for my actions. It was clear that my neighbor was escalating his aggressive actions once again, so to prevent anything happening like before, I decided to take precautions. I invested in a set of security cameras to monitor my property. While he had once been to jail for his actions, I knew it was not enough of a punishment to stop someone who seemed to be almost a maniac with how obsessive he was to my semi-truck and the environment. The cameras were a small but necessary step to safeguard my peace of mind and ensure the safety of my property. Though one fateful day, as I climbed into my semi-truck, something felt off about the brakes. It was a gut feeling that made me hesitate, and seeing how things have been recently, I did not ignore this feeling. I stepped out of the truck and decided to inspect the brakes more closely. To my shock and horror, I discovered that the brake lines had been deliberately cut. It made me paralyzed for a second as I thought about what kind of accident could have occurred if I hadn't followed my gut feeling and checked. I had a strong suspicion of who might be behind this harmful and absolutely horrendous act, but I needed concrete evidence for this. So I rushed back inside my house and immediately accessed the footage from all the security cameras I had installed. Most of the cameras showed nothing out of the ordinary, and I kind of knew why. My neighbor had been oddly quiet ever since those pamphlets, and I suspected it was because he had realized that there were cameras installed all over my property now that would no doubt catch him. So maybe he had found out the blind spots of my cameras and sneaked inside to mess with my semi-truck. But what he didn't know was that I had a few hidden cameras strategically placed. As I carefully reviewed the footage, there it was, clear as day, my neighbor sneaking around my property, unaware that one of my hidden cameras had caught him in the act. I decided to confront my neighbor immediately. I marched over to his property and demanded an explanation for how he dared to trespass on my property again and mess with my semi-truck. At first, he tried to deny any involvement, calling me a psycho for having a grudge against him. But as we argued back and forth, he finally admitted to it. He had the audacity to claim that I deserved what happened because it was God's way of teaching me a lesson. Yep, this nutjob believed that God's divine plan involved cutting my brake lines with the hands of my neighbor. What a load of BS. I couldn't help but laugh out at the absurdity of his reasoning. I then said that maybe my decision to call the police will also be an act of God, and this statement seemed to offend him greatly because he cursed at me, calling me a sinful man. And then he took it upon himself to dial the police number, accusing me of destroying the neighborhood and committing a crime. The police, who were already familiar with his troublesome behavior, arrived after about an hour. They did not seem particularly serious about the situation, and I couldn't help but feel that some of them were even amused to find a bit of drama in their otherwise routine day. As my neighbor approached the police, he continued his rant, accusing me of illegal environmental destruction and urging them to put me behind bars before I could cause any more harm. The head police officer, though, remained calm and composed as he explained that nothing about me owning a semi-truck was illegal or harmful to the environment. It seemed like he was dealing with a stubborn brat, and with how my neighbor was stomping his foot, that was not too far from the truth. My neighbor clearly did not appreciate the officer's response because in the blink of an eye, he charged towards me, pulling out a frickin' screwdriver he had somehow concealed on his body. I managed to dodge the first attack, and before he could make another move, the police swiftly intervened. So he then turned towards them instead, attempting to stab them with the screwdriver as well. Though bad for him, the police officer didn't hesitate to use a taser to subdue him. After a brief struggle, they managed to handcuff him and place him in their patrol car. When asked if I wanted to press charges, I immediately agreed. I again sent my troublesome neighbor behind bars, and this time I also managed to secure a restraining order against him to cover all my bases. Let's see what he does after coming back out, though he won't be getting out anytime soon. And yeah, Ripe stars, it seems like these entitled Karen neighbors really despise semi-trucks for one reason or another. And now we will read one last story from r/petty revenge that is super satisfying. It is titled, "He made his own bed and then he laid in it." Back when I was in high school, I was living in an apartment complex with my father and stepmother. One night I had a friend sleeping over, both my father and stepmother were out and my friend and I were at the apartment alone. It was about 11 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. when there was a knock at the door. I opened the door and two police officers were standing in the other side. They pushed their way in and started asking us questions like, "Whose alcohol is that?" "My parents." "Why do you have books on witchcraft?" "I like to study different religions." Before leaving, they told me that my neighbor complained that we were making too much noise and told us to keep it down. We were not making noise, but whatever. Well, about 30 minutes later, my stepmom came home and I told her about what had happened. She said she would take care of it and told my friend and me to go to bed. Well, the next morning, I asked my stepmother about what happened last night and she said that she called the cops on the neighbor for a noise complaint. The cops showed up and knocked on the door, and the neighbor would only talk to them through the door and told them that they would need a warrant before they would open the door. The cops left and they came back with a warrant. Upon entering the apartment, they found drugs, drug paraphernalia, and alcohol. Not everyone in that group was of age. My neighbor was arrested for possession and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. If you enjoy my content, please watch the video linked on the left side of the screen, and if not, I will see you again tomorrow.